Obviously, it seems like some of these are timed up. I don't know the ins and outs of all that. I've not had conversations with any of our three recent commits, Witters, Parliament, and Linder, but all three solid prospects, and they'll be nice pieces for George Barnett, assuming that this staff is still in place here in the next couple of years.
I believe Hudson Parliament is the highest ranked, at least according to 247 Sports, the number one rated player in the state of South Dakota and a top 20 defensive line prospect.
Yeah, I mean, and you know how where I stand with this. I always look at offer lists, and you're going to typically get the same uh, type of, or I say kids from the same basket that are getting the same group of offers, like Iowa State, Kansas State. A lot of those schools, Minnesota is typically in on Iowa kids. And at least with these battles, Iowa beating a lot of those schools out. And the other two as well. Witters, he's a kid that maybe not as, like you said, as highly regarded as a Hudson Parliament. Um, they've got good size. Parliament's a 26 kid who probably is going to grow a little bit more. I think is projected as an interior guy, but he's already listed at 6'4", 285 on surface level. That's pretty good size. And Linder as well. I mean, he's a kid who probably going to be interior, I would think. Although he's listed, I noticed this, he's listed as a tackle. And he's 6'5", 280. He's listed as a tackle on 247, and I believe on three's got him as an interior guy. So again, I've not had conversations with him. He's considered to be a top 50 guy, regardless of position. If you look interior or tackle, number three player in the state of Minnesota. If you scroll down, Mark, you can see some pretty good offers in there for another 26 kid in Linder. Again, Arkansas, SEC school. You got the Kansases, the Iowa States. Kansas State offered him, had a Cal offer. So he was getting some national interest. And obviously any SEC interest always, for a kid that's from the Midwest, these three kids straight from around the state of Iowa, just on the border. So, yeah, solid. I mean, I don't know. I'm very bad. I'll admit this freely. I'm not good at evaluating O linemen, and I've missed on so many. I was missed on a number of these guys. Some of it's injury related. We've discussed this. I don't think we need to run through the gamut of all the guys that have come through the program and not ended up panning out. But they've had a lot of 3 to 4 star kids that come through the program, never play, transfer out, retire due to medical issues. So it's just hard to project. But on surface level, you're like, okay, well, Kirk knows what he's doing. He's an O-line guy, and Barnett should know what he's doing. He's got Midwest roots, strong Midwest roots. He's done a pretty good job landing who he wants to land in general, with the exception being a couple of highly regarded kids from the state of Iowa whose names will remain unmentioned for today. So yeah, positive recruiting momentum. It seems like they want grouped commitments. They would rather 3 guys commit within a span of about a week than it being spaced out. And I think that probably makes sense. I would think that probably is good.
What am I missing there? Why does it matter?
Well, I would think it's positive recruiting momentum. Just having 3 guys commit all at the same time, it just, from an outside perception standpoint, other recruits, I would have to think, see that, especially other guys that have been targeted, offered, have visited with guys like this. They're like, okay, wow, something's good is happening here. As opposed to if one guy committed in January, another guy commits in February, another guy commits in March,
Okay.
this is going to turn heads more than just a random 3-star recruiting at a random, committing at a random time. That would be my 2 cents of it all.
No, that makes sense. That did not necessarily hit me. So yeah, Linder out of Minnesota, he's a top 4 player in the state there. As you mentioned, at least the 247 sports rankings are number 28 as an offensive tackle. And then Colin Witters, player out of the state, him being closer to home within the state of Iowa. What do you know about his high school program, that area, that level of football?
Well, Iowa City West High has produced a number of really good prospects over the years. So, and I believe so. I'm not a high school Iowa high school expert, but I'm trying to think short list. I think Oliver Martin was West High. There's City High and then there's West High. Sean Bacher Elliott Clough would probably be able to do a better job of kind of evaluating high school level. But a lot of really good prospects have come out of Iowa City West High, and frankly, the surrounding areas. Been some good players out of Tipton. There's been some good players out of Williamsburg. Caden Weegan comes to mind. I believe he was Williamsburg, if I'm not mistaken. And it's some good offers too out of Iowa City West. I had an SEC offer in there. I think Mizzou offered Witters, and he's got pretty good size. Let me pull up his profile here. No, Missouri did not offer him. Kansas State was the offer that Missouri was in on him. Kansas State offered Iowa State. Had a Lindenwood offer, Mark. So I know you're a big Lindenwood
Sure.
recruiting expert.
Powerhouse that is Lindenwood out
But
of course, Lindenwood, Kansas.
again, the size is
Did
what
I get that
is.
right?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
The size, the size is what impressed me about all of these guys. Here's another guy who is a 2026 kid, already physically. I don't know why we have to have a picture of him with his shirt off for his profile picture. I think that's strange.
Yeah. I got to say, it's so small on my screen, I didn't even notice it.
Well, I just think it's weird. Anyways,
Yeah.
moving along. 6'4", 300. I mean, big kid, right? He'd have the pack.
Yes.
Like Cade Peeper. Cade Peeper came in here, and he's already playing on the interior of that line. He came in at like 245 or 250, something really small like that. And these guys are all like all three of these guys, I think, are all in the 280 to 300 range already, and they're 26 kids. So everybody wants to bring up, size and whatnot, and I've downplayed that at times. I don't know that you can just look at, well, this team's got a bunch of 315-pound mugs, and that means that they're going to be better offensive line. But it's hard if you're not some O-line guru. The people that act like, unless you're a former coach or you've you're a professional scout, or you Tyler Barnes, for instance. It's going to be hard to comb through 100 offensive linemen that are all 3-star prospects and figure out, okay, which one has the best lateral speed with their feet and quickness. And, um, I just think size is one thing you have to look at this level. And if a guy's already 6'4", 300 with another year to go, that's probably a positive sign.
So to your point, I once was on a podcast with a guy that I forget what his credentials were exactly, but they were mighty impressive about offensive line play in college football and then projecting to the NFL. And he had done all these various stats measurements of, burst, explosion, they time all that stuff now. And then combined with, weightlifting totals and so forth. And he basically said, based on their studies, there's a threshold. Yes. Especially for some of the group of five and maybe some of the lesser power five programs, that weight does matter toward NFL stardom, but there's a threshold because, whatever that is, 300 pounds, let's say. So it doesn't matter that you're 350. That doesn't make you any more NFL ready than it would for a 300 pounder. But if you're a 280 coming out of college, then your chances of making an NFL roster and an impact. And then he also talked about weightlifting, like squat numbers, bench press numbers that you would think, oh, the strongest guys in America, they're the most NFL ready. No, he said it's a threshold, like whatever the weight measurement was, like 500 pounds, that if you're there, then you have a far better chance that if you can lift 450, you can squat 450 if you hit 500. But like beyond that, it's not measurable. It doesn't matter. So there's all those things are important, but there's a limit to, you got to be an athlete. Obviously, you got to understand your assignment. You got to be able to execute it. All those things that come into play.
And again, I'd like to look back at previous recruiting classes. It wouldn't be hard to do this, but if you go back and look at O-line commits from the last 5 to 6 years, how many of those guys were, close to 300 when they committed? I would guess few of them. I can't. That doesn't seem to be a thing. I'm even thinking of the last two, like the last few big tackles that they've had. Like I'm thinking Jack Dotzler out of Wisconsin, Cale Crow from Huxley, Iowa, and Cannon Leonard, like those were all big 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" guys. And I don't think those guys were even close to 300 pounds, maybe 280. But, this kid's a couple of these guys are projected as interior guys and are already pushing 285, 290, 300. So, yeah, it's interesting. I do think we've seen a shift at receiver the way Iowa's recruited or who Iowa has targeted as it relates to size. We've discussed that. It seemed like during the Brian Ferentz, Kelton Copeland era, there was more of an emphasis on getting big hand, long receivers for some obvious reasons, but I think also maybe a little bit overhyped, the size aspect of things. And now that Lester's here, and whether you want to give some of that to Budmeyer, I think the Lester effect is there. Smaller, quicker receivers, stronger route runners out of high school, even what they've done in the portal. And so I don't know if we've seen a shift at all with related to Tim Lester. I wouldn't think Tim is. I don't think Tim is probably doing much as it relates to saying, "Well, we want this offensive lineman." I don't think I don't think that's his job, nor does he care. Just I mean, he's got his offense, but he's not meddling in with what George Barnett, Kirk Ferentz are going to be doing with the offensive line. There is an aspect of too many cooks in the kitchen. That's why I also think part of the problem was with Brian Ferentz being the offensive coordinator is he's a former offensive lineman, and you got him working with quarterbacks where at the same time he's got expertise with offensive line, but you've got how many offensive line gurus on your roster, and the O line was never good when he was the coordinator. So I think I think they have what they need now as it relates to coaching talent. They have the guys that, with the exception maybe being Bud Meyer at receivers coach because he's a former quarterback who's never coached receivers until this past season. But you have the offensive coordinator that can assist him. So I think finally they have the right compilation of people coaching the right positions.